We only have a few minutes left, but I do want to look into the future here, of course, about the future of the alliance. You said that NATO has been militarily strengthened, but many of the threats that we're facing these days are non-military. Just talk about cyber warfare and so on and so forth. How equipped do you think NATO is to deal with these challenges and new threats?
Absolutely better equipped than in the past, but of course NATO has to adapt to the new security reality through strengthened cooperation with the European Union in countering disinformation, election meddling, etc. It's not only a military question, it's also a civilian question, but I think the EU and NATO should strengthen cooperation on that. Next, I also think NATO should engage much more in counter-terrorism. I would suggest to establish a fund of $1 billion to finance that activity. That would also help certain European countries to put money into that fund and fulfill the 2% pledge that way. We could also establish a special counter-terrorism headquarters within NATO. In general, NATO should focus much more on counter-terrorism. We should also do much more on smart defense, as I call it, to pool resources. Instead of thinking all countries or all member states should have everything on their shelves, we should pool resources, we should help each other. Better cross-border cooperation, also cross-border movement. In that respect, the European Union could do a lot through PESCO to ensure that troops could really move fast across borders if we need to deploy in the East. And finally, I also think NATO should do much more in an outreach to Eastern partners, and I already mentioned Ukraine. I fully agree that we should do much more in that respect.
Ben Hodges, what does the alliance need to do to stay relevant in the 21st century?
Well, number one, keep adapting the way it has been adapting. This is lightning speed. When you think about an institution that has 28, now 29 nations in it, from 2014 to 2018, all of the things that have happened with strong consensus amongst the alliance, a rapid turnaround for a huge organization within a challenging environment, I think is remarkable. So maintaining this adaptive nature and always prioritizing cohesion of the alliance with American leadership. So that's essential. I think it is time, though, for a more sophisticated approach to burden sharing. Just 2%, I'm not against 2%. I am against it as the only metric that matters. I think the idea of capabilities, investing in capabilities that help give the alliance what it needs. There's got to be another way to look at this that gets us more rail, more bridges, more rail capacity, improved missile defense, cyber defense. I mean, the Ministry of Defense of Germany does not pay for the cyber protection of Bremerhaven. That's another ministry, but it doesn't count towards 2%, but it's essential for us. Or Deutsche Bahn, just enough trains to carry one brigade in all of Europe. That's not enough for the alliance. So how do you incentivize spend investment in infrastructure that's essential for our collective security? I think the alliance and working with the European Union is the right approach.
I think politically it's of utmost importance to cultivate the relations across the Atlantic because transatlantic unity will remain the cornerstone of not only European but transatlantic security. And if we do not cultivate those relations, that is, if we do not travel, if we do not visit each other, if we do not attend universities or military colleges across the Atlantic, then gradually you will see a rift across the Atlantic. I think for young people it's a big challenge to cultivate a transatlantic relations, so that would be my advice.
Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see you. It's nice to be with you today in Warsaw. First of all, I would like to thank, the organizers for the invitation, and I must admit that we are meeting and discussing about security in a completely different atmosphere, completely different context than some years ago. I remember that subject of security on the European corridors, especially corridors of Brussels, of Strasbourg, was a subject not only forbidden but also forgotten, and and we are now in a completely different situation. This is at least my assessment. Security has become subject of debate, but what is more and more important is becoming the subject of very concrete actions, very concrete proposals, and also the subject of very concrete programs. And I'm really very glad of that. First of all, from the point of view of security, and not only internal security, but also external security. Internal security appeared important in Europe when we experienced a number of terrorist attacks in a number of places of the European Union. And it became clear that the European Union has to tackle this problem. It was much less obvious in relation to the external security because most Europeans, especially from the western part of the European Union, but especially politicians, they felt that we could live probably forever in a peace. We in this part of the European Union and in this part of Europe, in Central Eastern Europe, we had a little bit different opinion on that. And last years, especially in 2014 in Ukraine, they confirmed that we were right. And the European Union, as a result of that, started to change this position. Of course, all these changes were very much influenced both by NATO and also by the strongest member of NATO, by the United States. It's quite clear. And today we are talking about security, both internal and external security, as a priority of the European Union. And it is quite clear that this is the priority for the next financial perspective. And another element which I mentioned, security is becoming operational. So for the next financial perspective after 2020, so 2021, 27, security will be the priority not only in political terms, but it will have instruments, especially financial instruments, and I'm very glad of that. And I think we, especially in Poland, we are glad of that this is priority in political terms, but it will have also very clear financial instruments. I think that the European Union and Europe as a whole did mistake by neglecting security. And not only because of the security point of view, but also because of the competitiveness point of view. Because we're in the European Union, while putting a lot of emphasis on competitiveness of the European economy, we were not supporting practically any activities in relation to the defense sector. And this is why we were also losing the competitiveness vis-à-vis other countries in the world, especially China. Now that is changing. I mean, maybe not very rapidly, but that is changing. So we will have more and more common actions, common activities on the European scene towards strengthening the defense industry. And we did the same mistake in Poland, I must admit, because during the last 20-25 years, so during our transformation process, we are losing the competitiveness of the defense industry. And defense industry works not only for the security, but defense industry can very well work for the economy. So I'm very glad on that, because this will be not only, say, our countries, the countries of Central Eastern Europe, but the whole European Union will work on that. And we will have clear financial instruments for that. First, the support for research and development activities. This is a new change. And here we need much more cooperation between different countries, between our industries, between our scientists. And this should become really visible. So we will have to redirect the interests of some of our scientists, of our research centers towards the defense industry. And we will have a very important infrastructural tool, which is called military mobility. And I'm very glad of that. Because while planning some infrastructure projects, whether roads or railways, we were thinking about using these networks for the purpose of the military mobility, but we couldn't show that to our partners from the European Union. So we were a little bit hiding that some of the roads could serve not only for the civil purposes, but also for military purposes. Now we can do that, and even more. This new instrument, military mobility, with the budget of 6.5 billion euro, will be able to serve us to adapt many of the existing or the new roads to the NATO requirements concerning military mobility. First assessments of the needs showed that this budget is far too low in order to cover the requirements. It could be, well, 10 times bigger, and this budget could cover the needs of the member states, especially on the eastern wall of the European Union. The negotiations of the new financial perspective have only started, so I wouldn't mind if this budget was even increased by some additional demands, by additional amounts, because I consider that as extremely important. And the lack of adaptation of our communication channels to the needs of military services have been clearly shown during last months, when we tried to settle the first bases, the first troops on the Polish ground. So, in summary, security is not longer an unwanted child in Europe, and especially, in the European Union. It has become the real priority for the European Union. It will have also financial instruments in the new financial perspective, and Poland, especially my government, is very much committed to work on that. And I'm also pretty sure that as a result of that, we will not only strengthen our security, but we will also strengthen our economy, our defense industry, and not only this industry, but the whole economy will benefit from these new priorities. Thank you very much.
I want you to think, because we meet at these forums year after year, and it seems that the number of problems only grows, does not decrease. But I would want you to think about one optimistic, positive thing that has happened over the last year or is happening this year that you would want to share in 20 seconds with the audience? Because it's sometimes hard, we sometimes tend to forget that there's also good things happening in the area of security. So, Panie Ministrze?
Yes, I will just say that my yesterday's meeting with Pablo, it was very optimistic side of good relations with Ukraine and our cooperation with our friends from Georgia. We will have bilateral discussion after that panel today. So I think that it is a sign that Poland, from my experiences, relatively foreign minister, the first half of the year was to deal mainly with the European Union member states. Now it's time to look more towards our eastern partners, and we are doing this. It's very important. We are in the central Eastern Europe. We have to look to our neighbors to the east.
I will use this few seconds for also some small commercial. Straight after this panel, I invite everybody, members of the panel first of all, but also others to not far away from here by the reception area. We vivid demonstration of our Polish-Lithuanian friendship, unity and solidarity and alliance. That will be really interesting, very short event, so I invite you. It's also good news. So there are good news, let's look for them.
I'm gonna meet Orthodox Metropolitan of Poland, pushing further out our autocephaly. And it's about our mental independence, also from Russia. It's one of the big steps. But I believe, and you can take my remark as it's a bit philosophical, that fundamentally Europe, as a part of transatlantic community, is awakening to the fact that security and prosperity in this world is not just for nothing. You have to fight for it. It's not just something which will be there forever. And as Ukrainians, we understand we have to fight for everything in our life. It's about sort of combat spirit, not only military sense. The same spirit. It's about people who want to have their values and prosperity to prosper also out in the future. And I believe that Europe is definitely awakening. And for me, it's the most positive tendency I could follow.
Excellent. David, last but not least.
Yes, it's excellent that we have increased cooperation with our European partners, and this year we had unprecedented level of high-level visits, and also the new formats established within the frameworks of Georgia EU. Now we are preparing for the upcoming college to government meeting, which will be by the end of November, so it's will be excellent opportunity for Georgia to discuss the highest level with our European partners about integrational processes, sectoral cooperation. In particular, Georgia is developing roadmap to Europe, which is our unilateral task, our visionary document, how to go beyond the implementation of association agreement. And this document will help us to prepare country functionally to our eventual goal, which is full integration into the European family of nations.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ministers.
What can we learn from the existence of populism or from what populist parties are doing for the future of our democracies? And I'm starting with Konrad Szymański.
This debate is not the only one which proves very well that the concept of populism doesn't explain anything important. It's very low intellectual value behind this concept. It's a propaganda concept, it's a stick, it's a blame, but nothing important. If you want to understand the change of the political situation in Europe, you have to understand the root causes of disappointment. The Eurozone disappointment is different than the migration disappointment. Sometimes it goes together with some countries, and there you can see 40+% of people disappointed by the EU, for example, which is a worrying fact. And it creates a risk and a chance for people like Putin, for sure. But don't reduce the problem of populism to Putin, because it's a short way to close the real debate we need here. Debate about the equality in the society, about inclusive growth, about competitiveness, single market, migration, identity, community. Those things should be addressed also by liberals, by the way, in a proper way, contemporary, proper way. So the answer is adaptation, not blaming.